Sudbury, Dave Kurt, broker of record with Lake City Realty. So excited to be back with you for another episode of the Sudbury Real Estate Podcast.
We built Lake City. We built Lake City on rock, and so build Lake City. We built Lake City on rock and soul.
Sorry guys, I know I've apologized a lot in the past, but I took another hiatus last week. I was in the office, I was working, but I just didn't get around to filming the podcast. We did send out the newsletter for anybody that follows that online. Hopefully you guys were able to digest that. Life's been a little bit crazy, but I did appreciate to still get a chance to review the numbers, and anybody that wants, I'm happy to add you to our newsletter list in case I do miss the podcast in the future as well. But welcome to fall. It's officially here. Fall, honestly, is one of the best times in Sudbury. I know I'm a huge summer fan, and like lake swims, saunas, I love it. I just want to stay in there forever. I love the warmth. I love the heat. But we are also the city of the outdoors, and we have outdoors literally on our doorstep. So to be able to enjoy fall, from the hiking, from camping, the trees changing colors, honestly, the amount of flannel we see in Sudbury and the amount of Blundstones, like Sudbury in fall is just absolutely awesome. I absolutely love it. What's going on in Canada at national level? It was an interesting week. We had the Fed pull some interesting hikes. And I think everybody was predicting the hike was coming. They increased rates by 0.75% in the US, which 93% of the time Canada will follow suit in Canada. If they don't, it will do a bunch of damage to the dollar and therefore make our trade either really bad or really good kind of thing. But we also had the Canadian inflation numbers came out, and I think they were predicting around 7.4%, and those actually came in at 7%. So the inflation was slower than what the economists were actually making predictions about. So locally, from a national level, it actually feels like we're doing a better job than a lot of the other world, a lot of the other countries out there of battling inflation. Although we're seeing it from the Fed's perspective, is they were brutal. They said we're not stopping, we're doing everything in our power to continue to increase rates, and we're serious about beating inflation kind of thing. So the dollar took a hit, the bond market took a hit, everything, the stock market. It was a really negative day all around from an economic standpoint. I think that was about Tuesday was the inflation numbers, and Wednesday was their interest rate announcement. And then we had the official handing over the reins from the Queen, and we had her funeral this week, and passing it to King Charles. Which is just it's weird to figure out, still to think that we are still part of this big monarchy. And I know there's a lot of frustration and people that are saying they should be around, and what some of the things they've done in the past. But if we look at it it is what the situation we're in. It's pretty amazing to be connected to all these people, and to have a queen that was in power, whether you agreed with her power or not, for so long, and her reign that stretched such an amazing amount of time and decades, and prime ministers, and what she'd seen, I think it was 60 years or 70 years in power or whatever. So just absolutely an amazing feat for what she's accomplished. And now we passed it to the king, and locally I know there was a bunch of media up in roar about Justin Trudeau that was singing Bohemian Rhapsody at a piano when he was preparing for the Queen's funeral at a small gathering or something like that. And at the end of the day, he's a person, and this is his fun side's coming out, and I absolutely loved that he was able to enjoy himself a little bit and kind of make the most of his situation, and that's how he wanted to give a little bit of a tribute to his British, the British monarchy was through the ode to Queen there, and it didn't bother me at all. I know it bothered a lot of people, but it was just it was funny to see the outcry on that point. On the local level, it seems like we're kicking into a high gear with the local municipal elections. I was chatting in our office this week, and somebody's like, it's the first time this week that I noticed that there's more council and mayor signs than real estate signs on people's lawns. And I don't know if that has to do with the few number of listings, or just the number of signs from the mayoral race at an all-time high right now. Locally on a real estate front though, like my big bold prediction I made, way back 5 months ago or something like that, when rates really started increasing, I said we're going to be at 300 listings before you even know it. Like we're going to see this marketplace explode from a listing standpoint because buyers are going to be afraid to buy and sellers are going to try to rush their house to the market. That hasn't happened. And so this week we had 241 total listings available. Last week was 249, so we had like an 8 listings drop from last week. That was caused because we had a few more sales, so we had 43 sales this week versus 41 last week. 24 additional conditional deals. 21 of those 43 sales happened in multiple offers. So again, multiple offers still staying pretty strong for the number of deals that are happening. And then 56 new listings this week, and that's down from 64 last week. So that's a pretty sizable drop. But let's get into it. What are my 5 takeaways for the week? Takeaway number 1, sales up slightly and new listings down significantly. This is how we arrive at 241 listings this week. We've seen this trend play over the last few weeks, and I'm trying to make predictions. I'm like, oh guys, this is where we're headed because we're seeing this trend play 2 weeks in a row. I think this is going to be the start of a trend, and then it reverses. So it is really tough when I'm looking at short-term numbers and data every week, and I'm trying to draw conclusions about what we're seeing. But again, if I look at this, I'm shocked at the number of total listings that hasn't ballooned. And we got up to about 286 or 289 at a high, and we're back down to 241. I really think that we will not be in a buyer's market until we can either get to the point where there's literally maybe 5 or 10 sales happening a week, which is highly unlikely in my mind. This week again, it's a slower market. We saw 43 sales. Or we're going to see 500 total listings. And that's basically a doubling. Every red dot you see on Realtor.ca right now, that would be 2 of those red dots for every one of them there are. And I just don't see a world with it where that happens, at least in the short term kind of thing. And it's I know we talk about all the time, what's going to happen with the numbers and stuff like that. But it's amazing to me that we've been able to keep the listings to what they are right now with the rest of the environment around us. Sellers aren't saying, I've got to rush to list my house before I may take advantage of these buyers that are out there, or buyers are still pretty active in this marketplace and they're still out there, and we're seeing 43 buyers were able to secure properties in the last 7 days. These are pretty notable things that are happening in the marketplace right now. Takeaway 2, what a week for sales in the South End. Wow. We had 15 of the 57 sales this week. We're all in the South End, and when I'm talking about South End, I include hospital area, as well as Long Lake and Kiwi Park area as well. But more interesting this week is that 3 of those were $1 million plus. There's clearly still demand on all price points in this marketplace. But when I say that, the buyers are being much more cautious and much more selective with every offer they make. We've spent months and months telling our clients and buyers that rates are going up, the prices are pulling back. It's a great time to find a deal on the market. And that's what they're doing. My theory is that the buyers are out there shopping. They're looking for those deals. They're not going to pay any price. They're not going to pay $100,000 above listing price or whatever. They are looking for good opportunities. And if they see it, they're in a position to jump on it. They also are very smart buyers and the most educated buyers we've seen in a long time. So they're in tune with what prices are, what values are. They're watching online. They're chatting with their realtors on a weekly basis, on a daily basis to really find out where the values are on places. If the sellers think that they're going to get the premiums that came at the beginning of the year, that's not going to happen. And if the buyers are looking to take advantage of these smoking deals, they are there on some places. But it's going to take, to get a deal together, I always say it's a willing buyer and it's a willing seller. And to find both of those things, it's got to be a little bit of give from both of those people, I think. And those are the deals that are coming together in this marketplace. Still a lot of deals willing to go down, but it takes a little bit of bend from both the buyer and the seller to have a deal, I think, when I'm looking at those 43 sales this week. Takeaway 3 for the week. The Fed's announcement hit the financial markets pretty hard this week. Just a reminder that the Fed is that big bad wolf in the bank of the US that controls the interest rates. And they make changes. They kind of forced the hand of the Bank of Canada, Tiff McComm over the Bank of Canada, to respond. As if they don't, our dollar's going to be thrown out of whack. The Fed's rate announcement of increasing by 0.75% or 3/4 basis points wasn't that surprising, but it was that they reiterated that the rates are only going to continue to rise, despite they know it's going to cause a ton of pain for homeowners. They know for people with mortgages. They know for it's going to cause loss of jobs. They know it's going to cause probably like point them into a pretty hard recession that could be coming in 2023. And they're saying we don't care because taming inflation is that important to us, and we're going to do what we need to do to do that. On the flip side, north of the border, we had a positive numbers with our inflation numbers released this week. I think it was predicted that they'd be around 7.4 or something like that, and they came at 7. Like, I know this is still ridiculously high when we think of that we're winning with 7% inflation, but we got to take this moment for what it is. And it's, from one perspective, it seems like we're getting to a breaking point with inflation, and we might have a peak maybe a few months ago in Canada. But the U.S. is telling us that their roadmap is to continue to increase and cause more pain in the future with their lending rates, which is going to in turn increase their interest rates. So from one perspective, we see it, the U.S. is doing what they need to do, and then Canada seems like we're doing better, but then we also have to follow suit of the U.S. or our dollars are going to get crushed. So there's so much going on here. It's a really tough time to be in the marketplace. And again, I always say, like, if you're trying to time markets, it's probably the worst thing you could be doing. But if you're looking out there, if you're trying to take advantage of it, your dollar's going a little bit further than it did before. Now the question is, like, are you getting paid more at work? And like, are you getting paid, like, have your wage kept up to inflation, and like, have your take home kept up to inflation? Do you still have disposable income at the end of the month? Because if you do, well, an average house in Sudbury was 505 or 510 or whatever, and now it's 420. So your dollar goes much further. I listened to an economics podcast this week, and they said, like, if it's almost considered like a buying opportunity if you just almost put these things in units of value, as as long as you're not affected too much at work, and as long as you don't have a job loss or something like that, like in the immediate future, like if you're taking home the same income or even keeping a pace with inflation, everything's just been on sale by 20%, whether it's housing, whether it's stocks, whether it's mutual funds, like everything's been pulled back. So everything's just a little bit cheaper. And if you were planning on spending $1,000 to invest, that $1,000 is buying 20% more than it could have bought, 6 months ago. So it's an interesting outlook from that perspective. But I think the destruction really hasn't even started. We haven't even started to see this truly play out. As like in the land of the free here in Canada, 5% is going to be the new normal. This is the new normal interest rates, and like there is still future rates to come. I think that they might in the future maybe pull back, but 5% is kind of that new normal that we're going to find ourselves in, at least, and maybe it's going to be slightly higher. But like, we need to be okay with this. And even the people that are buying today, they're not paying the 5% rates because they've qualified for mortgages that they're on lower rates from 60 or 90 days ago at these much lower rates. So it's going to take 12 months for this to really play out in the economy, and only at that point will you see truly what's happened. And that's kind of why Bank of Canada, or international banks like the Bank of Canada, typically makes a small move and then they sit back and adjust and they see what's happening. But from their perspective, they need to solve inflation, and they're not able to do it with the increase in the rates at every single meeting. So they're saying we're going to continue to hammer that message home. It is a really interesting time. I hope that you and your family are doing okay around that. And it's a turbulent time for sure, whether it's housing or whether it's stock markets or whether it's whatever. But if from my perspective, I'm in my mid to late 30s now. I'm happy that I've got some runway ahead of me before retirement, because if I was looking to retire the next year or two, I think that things would look quite a bit different from my perspective. That was a long-winded take on inflation, and it's one of my points I'm spending the most amount of my time and energy researching on a week-to-week basis. So I appreciate you guys staying with me, and those that I still have their eardrums with it. But takeaway 5, as the market continues to pull back on prices, takeaway 4, but as the market continues to pull back more and more, we see that it almost feels like it's an artificially low rate tied to the fact that home prices increased to the level they did. And with higher rates, our new reality, the idea of prices pulling back just makes sense. The only thing that can in the real estate has saved grace is I don't really hear many people talking about immigration. Immigration is going to be really the thing that pulls us and pushes us to the next point of this marketplace on where this is what's really going to help the market rebound as quickly as I think it has the ability to rebound. And a lot of people aren't talking about it. The numbers I ran into this week, I heard some stats that shocked me. It was the overall population in Canada is projected to grow to 47.7 million Canadians by 2041. We're currently just over 38. So we're talking another 10 million Canadians in the next 20 years. That sounds like a long time, but I've been in real estate for 15 years, and I'm like, if I snap my fingers and I look back and I'm like, that's what we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be dealing with major cities that have grown by 30%. Picture Sudbury going from a population of 170,000-ish to 230. Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the social infrastructure? Do we have the healthcare systems? We're struggling as it is already. Selfishly, if I think of how I'll play for real estate, the demand that's going to be put on the existing infrastructure is going to be absolutely insane, which from a supply and demand position are surely going to push prices higher. The caveat here is I'm talking about a 2-decade, 20 years timeline. A lot can happen in 20 years, and I'm sure we're going to see some highs and lows within that time frame. But I think this is one thing that makes me so bullish on real estate as a long-term play is Canada is a fantastic place to live. I believe that immigration is a real thing, and it's the only thing that's going to continue. We know that there's going to be demand on immigration, and people are going to look at Canada as an amazing opportunity to come to. And if we can spot these cities like Sudbury that are kind of hubs, like Sudbury being the hub of the north, I think that people are going to be drawn to these locations. And what does that look like? It's going to be a much more international. It's going to be a much more diverse city. It's going to be a city that's going to grow. And I'm excited for it. I know it's going to be it's a little bit scary to think about how our existing infrastructure is going to handle it. But we might be seeing high-rise apartments in Sudbury to be able to match a 60,000 increase in population in the next 20 years. Takeaway 5: where does the market go from here? I still feel strongly that we're going to see that pullback in prices, even despite the current we've already seen a 20% that we've already seen. But if we zoom out and we think that prices will continue to, I think if we zoom out from our timelines that we're looking at, we're going to continue to see prices decrease until we get that leveling off in the Bank of Canada interest rates. And I was super optimistic that we were going to see that shortly, but with the Fed's moves this week, I just think that the interest rate hikes are going to continue to in the short term and really put some pain on the marketplace. Despite all that, we are also seeing what feels like an increase of activity this week, which doesn't really make sense, but there's fewer available listings on realtor.ca, as we've gone over a few times. And I think despite everything with the Bank of Canada, the market's showing us that there is some seasonality to the fall market. There's fewer sellers typically and fewer buyers, but maybe because we were already in the 40s for buyers, we weren't in the 60s and 70s and 80s, maybe that pullback's not as significant because we're already having a small number. That small amount of buyers is not going to get smaller. It's a smaller pool to begin with. And instead what we're doing is we're taking the total number of listings that would have been there, and people are like, I'd like to sell my house in the summer, the spring of the summer. Well, typically there's less sellers at this time of the year. So we might see kind of a moderation or a leveling off in the number of buyers because that pool is smaller to begin with, and those people are still motivated enough to be out there shopping. But the number of listings is following the pattern of seasonality, where it increases like dramatically in the spring, dips off as we saw that end of the summer into the fall, and that's kind of the timeline we're in. The other thing I wanted to take a quick look at here is I did a quick scan on the average sale price this week, and we talked earlier how there was some big sales. I think there was 4 sales over $1 million this week. But our average price point right now is about $420,000 based on the stats from last month. This week it was $507,000. So it's stat like this that continue to show my big bolder predictions can be off every week. Again, I don't have a crystal ball when it comes to these numbers, but I do my best to try to show you what's happening, come up with some insight, and then make some predictions based off that. But we can always be wrong, and clearly I've been wrong on a few of these things, but I will continue to push home that same message that I pushed home for a while, that prices were tied to interest rates, and that's what we've seen the pullback on. I believe in real estate in the long term. Sudbury's a great spot to live in. I absolutely love this city, whether it's fall, summer, spring, or winter, whatever time of the year. And if you're trying to time the real estate market, you're probably in the wrong. It's a good opportunity. If you see a house, if you like the house, if you can afford the house, if you take your time to do due diligence about the house, then make the move. And that's the best advice I can give you. Well, that's my big bold predictions this week. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm excited to chat with you guys next week. See you later, Sudbury.